Imagine for a second that physical wave of panic you get right before you're called on in a high-stakes meeting. You know the feeling, right? Your heart's racing, your palms are getting sweaty. Now, what if I told you that overcoming that feeling doesn't actually require some massive personality overhaul? What if confidence isn't just something you're born with, but it's actually a muscle? A muscle you can train in short 15-minute bursts every single day.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking the absolutely fascinating science of micro-bravery. We're going to look at how taking tiny, calculated risks can literally rewire your brain's fear response. The core concept we're exploring today is honestly incredibly empowering. Confidence is entirely learnable. It's a structured process, and we're going to map the whole thing out together.
Okay, so let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the science of self-belief. Second, rewiring the fear response. Third, the magic of micro-bravery. Fourth, winning at workplace anxiety. And finally, proof that it works. Starting off with Section 1, the science of self-belief. To really build confidence, we first need to understand the psychological mechanics of how we actually construct belief in our own capabilities. And this brings us to a foundational concept in psychology, developed by Stanford University's Albert Bandura. It's called self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is defined as an individual's belief in their capacity to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance outcomes. Notice how hyper-targeted that is? It's not just, generally feeling good about who you are. It's the concrete, solid belief that you can execute a specific task or a plan of action, whether that's giving a presentation, running a marathon, or just learning a new piece of software. And looking at this brilliantly illustrates a massive misconception most of us have. We constantly confuse self-esteem with self-efficacy, but they're totally different. Self-esteem is your overall sense of self-worth. It's super broad. Self-efficacy, on the other hand, is your belief in your ability to succeed at one very specific task. You can actually have really high self-esteem, but incredibly low self-efficacy when it comes to, say, public speaking. Understanding this difference is exactly how we start to target and ultimately conquer our specific fears. To put a real human face on this academic theory, let's look at a story shared by a woman named Brittany Lee on the Lemonade app. 7 years ago, she was divorced, a single mom, literally $0 to her name, and facing intense judgment from people close to her. She was absolutely terrified and starting from absolute rock bottom. But, as you'll see, this made for a perfect real-world laboratory for building self-efficacy entirely from scratch. So according to Bandura, we have 4 primary ways to build this self-efficacy. First, you have vicarious experiences, which is just watching others succeed. Then you have verbal persuasion, basically receiving encouragement from people. And you have your physiological states, which involves reframing your physical anxiety into something like excitement. But the most powerful source by far, mastery experiences. This means actually doing the hard thing, pushing through the fear, and experiencing personal success firsthand. Because honestly, nothing convinces your brain of your capability quite like actual undeniable proof. Connecting Brittany's story back to the science here, we can see a massive mastery experience in action. With horrible credit, rising rent prices, and literally zero outside help, she still managed to secure her own apartment. She wrote that this was the very first time she was living completely on her own without any help. That achievement wasn't just about getting a roof over her head, right? Psychologically, it was a mastery experience that proved to her own brain that she was fully capable of survival and success. Which brings us to Section 2, rewiring the fear response. Because now that we know we need these mastery experiences, we have to ask what stops us from getting them? Well, it's fear. So let's look at how we actually rewire our brain's natural panic response. You know what's really fascinating? Conquering fear like this is definitely not a modern invention. Way back in the 9th century, the Persian polymath Abu Zayd al-Balkhi wrote about treating fear by repeatedly forcing oneself near the scary thing until the fear is lost. Think about that. Humans have known the secret to battling fear for over a millennium. Today, we just call this exposure therapy. Modern clinicians use a few different types of exposure therapy to weaken those stubborn neural connections between our triggers and our panic. This ranges from in vivo, which is confronting real-life situations, to imaginal exposure, where you vividly visualize the feared outcome in your head. We even use virtual reality for simulations now. And there's interoceptive exposure, which is all about confronting physical sensations, like an elevated heart rate, but in a totally safe environment. All of these have one big goal: to break the pattern of avoidance.
This leads us to a highly effective technique called exposure and response prevention, or ERP. ERP involves confronting a feared stimulus while purposefully refraining from your usual escape response. The absolutely crucial point here is this concept of inhibitory learning. See, the goal of exposure isn't necessarily to magically erase the fear completely. Instead, it's to balance that existing fear with new learning. You're giving your brain hard evidence that the terrible outcome you're predicting won't actually happen, and proving that you can actually tolerate the distress. We can totally see this exposure in action when we look back at Brittany's journey. She took this massive step and became a brand ambassador for a photographer. Now, she admitted she was utterly terrified of rejection and worried she'd disappoint people. But instead of escaping that fear, instead of giving in to the urge to quit and run away, she stayed in the situation. By choosing not to run, she allowed that new inhibitory learning to take place. And ultimately, she found lifelong friendships and immense self-love. Okay, moving to section 3, the magic of micro-bravery. Taking on a brand ambassador role or signing a lease are huge steps. How do we apply this to everyday life? Let's zoom in on author Tom Kelly's highly practical framework. Look, most of us are constantly waiting for a moment of big bravery. You know, a bold leap of faith or some dramatic, rare decision. But waiting around for that massive leap is a trap. It's just too overwhelming. The shift we actually need to make is toward micro-bravery. We're talking small, doable actions that cause only mild discomfort. It's consistent, it's daily, it is the everyday practice of gently stretching your comfort zone, rather than trying to completely shatter it all at once.
I absolutely love this insight from Tom Kelly. He says identity doesn't shift when you think differently, it shifts when you behave differently. I mean, wow. You cannot simply think your way into being a confident person. Every single act of micro-bravery provides your brain with tangible physical evidence that you are someone who takes action. It proves to your nervous system beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can handle discomfort. So how long does a micro-brave move actually take? Just 15 minutes, maybe 30 at the absolute most. And that is the beauty of it. It's sending that one specific email you've been avoiding. It's speaking up just one time in a meeting. It's saying no to a request without over-explaining yourself. It's a low-resistance, highly repeatable action that builds your mastery experiences one tiny block at a time. Let's see how this builds into our professional lives with Section 4, Winning at Workplace Anxiety. The workplace is basically a gauntlet of potential triggers, so let's look at how to apply these tools specifically for office fears. First off, we really need to acknowledge just how common this is. A full 15% of working adults experience social anxiety disorder. If you get a racing heartbeat, a trembling voice, or sweaty palms right before a project update, you are absolutely not alone. It's a very real physiological response, and it causes so many professionals to avoid speaking up or taking on high-visibility projects, which unfortunately can really stall careers. To combat this, the Ahead app outlines 5 extremely actionable steps that perfectly combine Bandora's self-efficacy theory with Kelly's micro-bravery. Number 1, strategic preparation, basically reducing uncertainty by just having a few talking points ready to go. 2, in-the-moment grounding. Think of the 5-4-3-2-1 method, where you silently identify things you can see, feel, and hear, just to calm your nerves. 3 is gradual exposure practice. This is your micro-bravery in action. You start by emailing a question and work your way up to speaking in the actual meeting. 4, cognitive reframing, actively challenging those negative thoughts with real evidence. And finally, 5, building a strategic support network of trusted colleagues around you. And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, Proof that it works. We've covered the theory and the daily frameworks. Now let's look at the real-world results of consistently applying these principles. Let's check back in with Brittany from our earlier slides. By stacking these small, micro-brave moments over time, she completely transformed her reality. The result? Well, she pushed through the terror of rejection and launched her own business. She overcame the fear of judgment from her past, and now she actually uses her own mastery experiences to coach other women to do exactly the same thing. Her identity shifted entirely, all because her behavior shifted first. As Brittany herself wrote on Lemonade, no matter what you are scared of, keep pushing through the fear. I promise it will be worth it. Really let that emotional takeaway sink in for a second. Facing your fears using micro-bravery isn't just some clinical exercise and exposure therapy. It is a deeply rewarding path to becoming the person you actually want to be. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative question. What is one 15-minute micro-brave move you are actively avoiding right now that you could literally go do today? Don't wait around for a moment of massive courage. Pick something small, expect a little bit of discomfort, and apply the science. Go take that first step toward your new identity today.